I'm here in Vancouver. Come rain or shine, people die. We're exploring all things death, the taboo, the rites, the rituals. How do we grieve? And ultimately, let's hack death so that we can die well. Follow along. Everybody's going to die. Almost nobody knows how. This channel is going to change that. My name is Victoria Holmes, and I'm the co-founder of Otherside, and I've been a death doula for over a decade. We're here to hack death, learn how to grieve, find the resources you need, and learn how to die well. It's been my experience that those who have mastered death have mastered life. To get to that edge of the space in between living and dying is the moment where we see most people contemplate their life in the most real and authentic ways. As a death doula for over a decade, I've seen such a consistency at the end of people's lives. And I've noted that people don't talk about their taxes and they don't talk about the details of life that were insignificant, the big fight, all these things that we're worrying about in our day-to-day. They only speak about life in a feeling-based way. I felt, I wish I felt. I've learned more about living from the dying than I have in masterful lifing, I would say. And the way that I bring that into my life is when I'm having a really bad day is I go back to what I worry about this on my deathbed. And that's a real leveler. There's a way to die well and they're dignified and supported, and there's a way not to. And if we wait until the end to organize and make those decisions, this can be a really challenging transition. What I've learned from interviewing a lot of people, from seeing death in an intimate way, death is one of the most intimate experiences you will ever have in your entire life. And for most of us in the West, we don't see it until maybe one of our parents or in a shocking circumstance. And it feels like a shocking thing, but the reality is death is the most normal part of the human experience because it is the only thing that is guaranteed to happen to every single one of us, no matter where you're born, how much money you have, or what your culture is. So that's a great leveler. And I've enjoyed leaning in and exploring this topic because I've seen some really key consistencies across all of those levelers. Community. When we die without community, it is not dignified. Everybody wants to be seen and held and supported in their final moments of life. We all want to be witnessed. We want people to listen and let us know that we mattered. And wow, what matters on your deathbed is not what matters for most of us in our life. And that has been something that's been really clarifying. It's my belief that those who master death will master life. It's a whole perceptual shift. And that there's ways to die well, and there's ways ultimately not to die well. We want to be touched when we're dying. We want to be sang to when we're dying. We want to have the people we love show up. And there's so many ways to create rites and rituals, and taking the time to think about how you want to honor your own life actually allows the people around you to honor you while you're living. And I think that's what most of us actually really want. Helping somebody die is really intense. And what I've seen is that we have to build capacity to be grief space holders. And we have a culture that can be somewhat grief phobic. It's sort of kept in the dark, or even, work or a Western way of living wants you to grieve in your 2 weeks that you get off and then come back and be fine. But grief isn't linear, and it shows up in these little things. You might be doing the dishes and you remember your mom and you have a wave of grief because that our loved ones live on. People leave their body, but what I've seen is that relationships don't end. And that's the part that's the most surprising about grief, is you have to adjust that relationship because your memories make it present and active. And we need support for these transitions. We need to talk about them, but ultimately grief is something that also lives in the body. You can talk about it your entire life and you might not move that feeling because ultimately it's a feeling. Learning how to get in the body so that you could then express it through talk in an authentic way, that's really helpful. Learning how to be in community. So being in community means we have to serve, and then we'll also be served. So having that kind of reciprocity. And we're coming to this great wave of life, death, grief, mortality, spirituality. The world has never been so upside down. And we're all facing grief, whether it is in a form of an identity, could be a loss of finances, having to relocate, could be a war, a divorce, or it could be actually just leaving your body. And in our historical cultures, we would see death throughout our entire life. You'd see your grandma die, you'd be holding her hand, maybe then your grandpa, eventually your mom, your dad. And that trained us to have intensity, to feel intensity in our body and to know that we could go on. And ultimately, we all want connection. And what I see as a bridge is, in order to have connection, we have to sit in intimacy and intensity, but we're not really trained. Death is actually the training for that in the culture. We've removed it. So I believe that if we all learn how to die well, we all learn how to serve death as a very natural and normal thing, that we'll actually live lives that are more intimate and connected, which is the thing that we really want, no matter what your circumstances. I got into this in a very non-direct way. When I was 19 years old, most people went to university and I decided to move to Bangladesh on my own. And my parents were like, "Where's Bangladesh?" My dad didn't even know it was like a country. So I picked myself up. I moved to Bangladesh. I was volunteering and I was working on a project, and I just happened to not be at the project that day. And my project was suicide bombed. I grew up in a town of 3,000 people. I don't think I'd even thought about death, and I hadn't really been touched by it at that moment. And I remember coming back the day after the bomb and walking through, the rubble, and smelling dead bodies, burning flesh. And it is something that is so seared into my mind. I will never forget that moment, because at 19, you don't know you can die yet. But I had a very different experience because I had the honor of looking death in the face. This was over 20 years ago, so we didn't have survivor's guilt. We didn't talk about things. There wasn't grief circles. It was just, you just got on with it. So I had this really big life moment, and I had a lot of guilt that I lived, that I happened to not be there. And that made me ask a really big question, really faith-based questions, really young, like existentially. And so I ended up rowing across the Atlantic. I come out of this suicide bomb. I'm completely fucked up, and I have no way of processing this. There's no support. And I ended up moving to Ireland, and I'm sitting in this pub, confused. I'm now 20. And this pamphlet lands on this pub table, and in big bold letters, it says, "The ultimate test of the human spirit." And it called me so deeply. I had lost faith in humanity at such a young age that I knew that I had to understand my own mortality in order to want to go on living. So I said, I'm going to do this. I open up this pamphlet. It reads in big bold letters, "The ultimate test of the human spirit. Rowing across the Atlantic Ocean from Spain to the Caribbean in a 24-foot ocean run boat." I had never rowed a day in my life. I had never been in a boat. I had never been in an ocean. And I was like, I'm going to do it. So I spent 6 months learning how to row, raising 90,000 euro. And myself and my partner at the time got in a little rowboat, and I effectively rowed home to North America. Well, that ended up being the year of Hurricane Katrina. So I went through hurricanes and tropical storms. My boat capsized on top of me in a 60-foot swell. I broke my ribs and rode for 30 days. And the power of this is, ultimately, it was a journey of meeting myself. That whole experience was the part of in between being alive and not being alive. The margin of error was almost zero. At any point in time, this 60-foot swell could take us down. At any point in time, you could fall off the boat, and we were totally unassisted. I didn't know it at the time, but this set the course for my entire life. And my relationship with mortality, my relationship with the fragility of life, and ultimately what it means to be human. When I hit land 86 days later, it's so much bigger than it looks on the map. I thought it was going to take me 30 days. I was just this young woman. I was 21 years old, and I had this huge experience. And in a weird way, it ended up being a very grieving experience, because the woman who left in the Canaries wasn't the woman who finished in Barbados. And this is what I mean is we don't just die at the end. We're going to die multiple times in our life because we're going to give birth to new versions of ourselves. And in order to become that next version, you're going to have to lose or let things go. So this became a really isolating time in my life because I was 21 and I had a Guinness World Record and I rode across the Atlantic and it looked so amazing, but it really separated me from my peers and it was a very lonely time. It was a very challenging time on my mental health. And it took me a long time to heal my body from that experience, having 3 broken ribs and rowing for 30 days, 12 hours a day, in order to survive. More people climb Mount Everest on a daily basis than have ever survived rowing across the Atlantic Ocean, just to quantify it. And I spent a decade learning about health and my body and trying to recover the depletion that created in my body. And what I realized is my life became a series of thresholds and transitional moments. I, at a different time in my life, found myself in almost dying with dengue. I had dengue fever for 7 days, probably one of the best lucid dreams of my life. That's a whole other story. And losing a baby at a late stage. And I just became this person in the community because I shared my pain and I shared my grief openly. Is what started to happen is this: people started calling me to help them with their grief, or people started calling me to help them with resilience. I ultimately became a coach for people going through big life moments, which I call life quakes. Those are the moments that bring you to your knees. And I spent almost 20 years mastering a variety of tools and mental health tools. And what I saw is where they came most into play was in grieving moments, whether that was a dying moment or whether that was a living moment where something was dying. It's kind of all the same. So I've had this obsession with death, and being invited into people's last and final intimate moments, I saw this pain where people would get so distracted from the logistics of dying that they wouldn't get to heal. And something in that just broke my heart, because dying isn't optional, but I have seen that chaos is. And chaos comes when we don't reckon our own life and death. And chaos comes when we are in resistance to ourselves and natural processes that are going to happen. And chaos comes when we don't complete a will and we leave our family to deal with things that they don't know how to deal with when they just actually want to be giving tribute and loving you. And I just saw that all of this was solvable, that I couldn't not, with my partners, create a platform that could give people a better way of dying. And so we set out on this mission of how to die well. And we realized that if we streamline the process of dying, we could deal with death, and ultimately people could then heal through death. And this is a cultural movement. The Otherside is a platform that systemizes and streamlines the process of dealing with death. And the value of that is it allows you to heal while we do all the dealing. Death is as logistically intense as a wedding, but let's be honest, you're going through your worst time, not your best. And most of us, myself included, I don't have great project management skills, and definitely not in my big grieving moment. So we have taken the whole logistical and business aspect of death, and we have just simplified it and made it easy for everybody to see exactly what's going on, so you and your team connect with each other. And then it's my personal mission as a death doula that we create a platform that allows people to have the right support. Your family member gets the right support in this process. What makes us unique is this is an absolute everybody problem, because we're all going to die. And the reality is currently there isn't anything out there that systemizes dealing with death and healing with death simultaneously. Have you ever had a business where it's so obvious that you're thinking, how has somebody not already solved this? And the reality is death is industrial and archaic and disorganized, and everybody's going in all of their different directions. And it is a moment that you are guaranteed to be the most deregulated. So at bare minimum, we just systemize this process so that you could have transparency, that you could feel empowered and have more control. Because most of us, myself included, even somebody who sees death all the time, we don't actually know what the process is. Like, what are the actual steps of executorship? And we just make it easy and transparent. And we made it because it didn't exist. And that's crazy. So the other side, we're going to travel around the world and we're going to find all the rites, the rituals, the ways, the hacks on how to die well. What does it mean to die well is how do you grieve? How do you move that big feeling through your body? What kind of support is available to you? What's the point of a rite and a ritual? And what even are your options in a culture where we don't all have religion? We all haven't grown up in a way that it's been explained to us even what's going to happen. We're having this taboo conversation. We're all a little bit grief phobic because it's a bit scary and it's been in the dark. And we're bringing the conversation and normalizing it. And through looking through, I would like to explore, rabbis and Buddhists and spiritual and even near-death experiences. What happens for those who have touched the other side, as well as what is the logistical processes and the hacks that a lawyer could give you in order to have a better executiveship so that you could spend more time with your loved ones, so that your family could stay united. And ultimately, we are in a cultural moment right now where we have never seen more death and we just don't have the right care support. Just in Canada alone, 17% of people die at home, but in the next couple of years, it's going to be 80% based on our resources. So this means all of us are going to be touched by death and all of us are going to have to be doulas. We're all going to have to take care of people who are passing on. We're going to give you the tools and the resources and the direction to have that be hopefully a beautiful experience, an intimate, a connecting experience with your community, because we're at a choice point, and this is why this is a mission. We have the opportunity to collapse or come together, to separate, or to have this be a moment of awakening where we actually rebirth what it means to be in community. What it means to die well is going to directly inform what it means to live well. We're here in Vancouver exploring all things death. Why Vancouver? Did you know that 1.2 million baby boomers live in BC, Vancouver having the biggest population, and that we currently are looking at 400 hospice beds? We're looking at an overall about 40,000 care access unit support for a $1.2 million problem. So why are we here? We're about to have a wave of death meeting life. And the reality is we're all going to be grieving in this next period. So we're here in Vancouver and we're talking to all sorts of people about life and death. We are learning how to actually grieve. What does it mean? Like, what even is grief? Grief is a body thing we learned, and we're going to give you tools and tips on how to physically relieve yourself through these big emotions of anger and grief and resentment and denial. We're talking to different faiths on rites and rituals and why they matter and expanding our options. We're also talking to death doulas who've seen it all, from training on the Ganges in Varanasi to cremation to beautiful ways of life and death and dying and modern ways of dying. And then also people who are experiencing MAID, which is part of the cultural conversation specifically in Canada and on the rise in BC. So stay tuned as we go through this first series. Invite us to your city if you have something interesting to share on death, and we'll see you there. The first interviews we have lined up in Vancouver are Teresa Campbell, an extraordinary somatic doula, helping people really feel grief and move through these complex dying circumstances. We've got Stephen Garrett, who is an author of The Seven Sorrows and the languages around that, helping people understand even what grief is and the perspective of what do we need to know about dying when somebody has spent their mastery 40 years in this container. We're going to talk to Corey Hill from the perspective of how the Jewish faith approaches life and death and why they have certain spiritual containers in order to help people cross over to the other side. We're going to also talk to Rambir Pure, who's going to share what it's like to have a multicultural way of dying that even a care provider who's been in the space for a long time, we can never really fully be prepared, and the wisdom that can come with that intimacy. We're going to be speaking to Christine Koski and Devin Carr on MAID and the complexity of dying in chosen ways versus tragic ways, and how people can really take control and empower we don't always know how we're going to die, but the reality is we do get to choose the process of what we want around that.